Y'all ready? It's time to talk ball with Spunky Spectrum. Let's ride! Ow. Woke up in the morning, coffee in my hand, another season about to start. I'm the fantasy man, scouting sleepers, crunching numbers late at night, building rosters that gon' shine under them lights. From rookie watch to big revenge, I see it all, stacking points while the league's watching me ball. Best ball drafting, no waivers, just pure skill. I'm taking shots, watch the whole league getting killed. Yeah, the grind don't stop, the picks stay high. When the money's on the line, I connect the dots. We're talking fantasy football, best ball drafting deep. Spunky Spectrum spinning, put a league to sleep. 15 grand on DraftKings, cashed it like a king. Now the whole damn country know I run this thing. Yeehaw, raise them up, another W in the books. Fantasy king, got the trophies and the looks. From the podcast mic to the big check in my hand, this is Spunky Spectrum boys, the fantasy man. Best ball season.
Yo, Big D here. Not talking about sports tonight, even though I think Joe Burrow's already been sacked in a preseason game. Yes, talking Hurricane Charley revisiting and Florida's long, and I mean long, history with hurricanes. John Top Productions, Spunky Spectrum Sports. Also check it out Facebook. My personal Facebook page, Dylan, DYLAN, SCHMITTLEO. Also the Twitch spheres, the Big D 3300. Talking all things hurricanes. Yes, I'm not talking about sports right now, unless somebody gets traded or another crazy. I think the Field of Dreams game is happening on Netflix, but that's a story for another day. Yes, on this day, August 13th, 2004, Hurricane Charley pulled the ultimate curveball and didn't come to Tampa. It came to Southwest Florida, that are causing 15-16 billion dollars of damage, killing 10-15 people, and becoming at the time the second costliest hurricane in American history. Of course, number one being Andrew at the time, and we know what's happened since. And things have changed since Charley, some for the better, some for the worse. The building codes have definitely improved, but, Hurricane Charley to this day is still a litmus test for storms that have hit Southwest Florida. And we all remember where we were, particularly those here in Southwest Florida. I can remember to this day where I was. 6400 Emerald Pine Circle, Fort Myers. Our house was built in like 97, so not the strongest house. And we didn't even have shutters on all of the windows. I don't think we shuttered the sliding glass windows, the front window, the front door. So luckily, Charley didn't really hit us, but part of me imagines what 150-mile-an-hour winds would have done to our house. Let's just say this, it wouldn't have been a pretty sight. So probably the only time in any hurricane, whether we were in Fort Myers, Tamarack, or now here in the state, that we actually took a mattress off the bed wondering what's going to happen. But, of course, Hurricane Charley hit Cayo Costs, then of course hit Captiva, Pine Island, and Bokeelia. Hit Punta Gorda, and then Arcadia. Even hit Orlando and Daytona, becoming crazy hurricane. Now, what's crazy to me about Charley wasn't the biggest hurricane, but that storm was moving 22 miles an hour. So, and when Charley kept strengthening that morning, that afternoon, the storm kept shrinking in size. It went from this a small hurricane to even smaller. So the eye I was only, 6 nautical miles. Usually I was more like 20 or 30 miles wide, but Charley's eye was only 6 miles. So unlike other hurricanes like Katrina, Irma, Wilma, even Ian to a lesser extent, Charley was more or less a big tornado, but hitting for like a half hour, 45 minutes. But what fooled everyone, not just here, not just here, is that everyone, hi Jennifer, thank you. What fooled what fooled everyone is that for 2, 3, or 4 days, all the media kept saying Tampa, 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 even going back to August 10th. Look at this projected path. Have Storm Charley basically was forecasted to be around Jamaica, then around the Cayman Islands, then make an impact on the western tip of Cuba, and then the big question mark on Friday the 13th. Yes, Friday the 13th, the day we all love. What's going to happen next? Next. Is it going to go up the road, maybe hit the Big Bend? Is it going to go maybe Cedar Key, maybe hit Tampa Bay, or maybe go south? And even here, you look at it, Southwest Florida is well within the cone, but everyone kept saying Tampa, 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 and even to this day, Tampa has not been hit by a major hurricane in 105 years, which is crazy. And by the way, if you want to check out, I have 2 Hurricane Charley videos. I have one with, I think, Scott Keeler, who was a reporter for the Tampa Bay Times, and then 2 years ago for the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Charley, Jim Eds, who was in Punta Gorda doing the landfall. Both men were on Punta Gorda. Scott was at the Charlotte County Airport, and of course Jim was in Punta Gorda, basically at ground zero where all hell was happening. And to this day, collected some of the greatest data I've ever seen. In fact, you look at the winds from Charley. Let me see if I can find it. Just saw this from the Zach Malak on Wing. The Hurricane Charley gusts, look at Mike Tyson's video. Mike Tyson, not Mike Tyson, but Mike Tyson, Storm Chaser, recorded wind gusts, 170 miles an hour. Charlotte County Medical Center reported an unofficial wind reading of 173 miles an hour. The Punta Gorda Airport was 160. Port Charlotte was 132. Arcadia 104. And of course, these were unofficial wind observations. The RSW and Page Field all confirmed. So RSW saw wind gusts of 78 miles an hour. Page Field saw wind gusts of 76 miles an hour. A wind gust and a sustained wind are not the same thing. A wind gust could be a second or so, but a sustained wind would be a continuous wind over a specific period of time, maybe a minute or so. And in this case, the winds gusted to hurricane force at both at the RSW airport and the Page Field airport. So even Vanderbilt Beach gusting 84 Cape Coral. I think this was at fire station number 5, gusting to 90 miles an hour. And crazy what happened in Cape Coral, because for a while it looked like Cape Coral was going to get hit. But what Charley showed is that the cone is usually somewhat accurate, but anywhere on the cone is fair game. And for whatever reason, storms that come near the south, that come near the east coast, the southwest coast of Florida, always go to the right. It's happened in Charley, it happened in Irma, and happened in Ian. I don't know why. We're just a magnet for storms the last 20 something years. Even Wilma, but I think we knew Wilma was coming here. And, it's just mind boggling. And because for a while, the U.S. had more or less been okay with hurricanes. Obviously, Andrew devastated Homestead, Florida City. Opal hit the Pensacola area in 95. And of course, we know what happened in 98, where Mitch devastated Caribbean. And of course, Hurricane George basically hit every island, then hit the Keys, and then hit the Northern Gulf. I think that's a major hurricane. And then, of course, Tropical Storm Allison flooded Houston, which is its own sector. But 2004 ended up being one of the craziest hurricane seasons on record, with 4 hurricanes hitting Florida: Charley, Francis, Ivan, and Jean, and of course Charley. And what I remember about Charley, I remember swimming in my pool the night before Charley hit, wondering what was going to happen. Wondering how bad was it going to get. And even waking up that morning, didn't seem that bad. I mean, it did not seem like Hurricane Charley was going to hit the Southwest Florida. I mean, you look at the 5 o'clock update, 5 a.m. update that morning from NOAA. Charley was at 23.9, 82.9 west, winds of 110 miles an hour after hitting Cuba overnight that morning. So Cuba really didn't weaken the storm. North-northwest at 18 miles an hour. The forecast was for the storm to basically maintain a northerly direction, maybe start to wobble eastward, and then hit, I think it was Longboat Key, and then hit the Tampa Bay area. Well, that didn't happen. Instead, this is what happened. And by 7 a.m., the storm was more or less done turning to the west. And by 9 a.m., the storm had wobbled a bit eastward, northeast for a while. And by 11 a.m., the storm was more or less back on track. But then afterward, by noon, the storm was beginning its turn northeast. And then, not only that, but around the same time, Charley picked up its last bit of fuel. I think by noon, 1 o'clock, Charley was a major hurricane, 125 mile an hour winds. Then, not afterward, I remember Jim Reeve of NBC2, ABC7 saying, discussing that Charley become a Category 4 hurricane with 140 mile an hour winds, and then 145 mile an hour winds, heading to Southwest Florida. I mean, by noon, 1 o'clock, Charley was no longer heading to Tampa. It was coming to Southwest Florida, more or less Sanibel, and then the Cape Coral, North Fort Myers, maybe downtown Fort Myers region. So basically, right up the Caloosahatchee. But then, by 3 o'clock, Charley was on our doorstep. I think we were without power by like 2 o'clock, which actually surprised me. Because the storm wasn't even there yet. Then Charley threw another curveball, bounced off Sanibel here, then split Captiva and Upper Captiva, and then basically went up Charlotte Harbor, devastating Punta Gorda and Port Charlotte. Now, before I discuss why Hurricane Charley, all these projected paths wasn't that far off, but everyone was focused on Tampa. Well, Tampa's a city with millions of people. Tampa population 2004. Tampa's population, a couple 100,000, but the whole Tampa St. Pete metropolitan area consisted of over 2.5 million people. So that area going to more attention than Southwest Florida, where even though everybody's seemingly moving down here now, the towns were a little smaller than they are now. Plus, Tampa's a very difficult area to evacuate because there are so many roads. So many roads that are low line. There's so much infrastructure that's low line. Plus, the roads in and around Tampa are not plentiful. There aren't that many roads. 75, 275, maybe I-4. That's about it. And if a storm went into the bay, or maybe just north, maybe, let me see. Let me think. Okay. If the storm went more or less here, that water would be pushed right into the bay and flood everywhere. Where? And it's crazy. I remember speaking with Scott and Jim, and I believe both of them. I think I think Jim spent the night in Tampa thinking Tampa was going to get hit. I don't know where Scott was. But then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, we need to move down the road. Maybe Sarasota. Nope. How about here, Punta Gorda? And just crazy. Not only did the storm come south, but strengthened. So, really, the Barrier Islands and the Cayo County coast, Port Charlotte and Punta Gorda, only got about 3 or 4 hours of warning time. So, we think of hurricanes now as having 2-3 days warning time. Well, some people got 2-3 hours, and there were stories of people who tried leaving, but in a Cat 4 hurricane, particularly one coming in as fast as Charley, because Charley was moving 20 miles an hour until it stopped basically at Sanibel for like 20 minutes, a half hour. But not only did Charley have the increasing winds, but the forward motion of the storm meant the storm was going to hit very fast. So in this case, Charley, when it hit the baryons, when it hit Punta Gorda, when it hit Arcadia, the storm didn't just have the 140 mile per hour winds, but put in the 20 mile an hour speed, and anyone in the right front quadrant, right, and I'll stop now and say, what's the right front quadrant? The right front quadrant is the northeastern part of the storm. Generally, not always, but the northeast quadrant is the most dangerous part of the hurricane because the the storm not only combines the actual wind speed, but adds the forward motion of the storm. So if a hurricane's 120 miles an hour, the storm's moving 10 miles an hour, the winds could be 130 and vice versa on the left side, which is why we want to be on the left side because, yeah, the winds would still be damaging, but not quite what the right side would get. But Charley was such a small hurricane. It was unusually small. The hurricane force winds only went out about 30 miles. In fact, comparing Charley to Ian is like night and day. Because Charley's wind field only went out 30 miles. Hurricane force wind field. So believe this would be 64 knots. So these would be hurricane force winds. The yellow marks, tropical storm force winds. The orange mark would be hurricane force gusts. And this red shades would be hurricane force sustained winds above 74 miles an hour or 64 knots. But in Ian, the wind field was far more expansive. You see here in Charley, the whole Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach area, nothing. Here, they got some wind. In fact, a lot of tornadoes. But look here. Southwest Florida, look at the hurricane force, the tropical storm, the hurricane gust. The hurricane force wind field didn't really go that far south. But in Ian, and it meant everyone, whether you were in Estero, whether you were in Fort Myers, saw hurricane force winds. I can attest, we saw hurricane force winds here in Ian. But in Charley, I don't know, I don't think we saw a hurricane force wind, maybe a gust in the 70s, but certainly not a sustained wind above 74 miles an hour, which matters. But then, after bouncing off Sanville, Charley hit Captiva 140, 150 mile an hour winds. We know what happened. Hit Punta Gorda. In fact, I remember watching because we were without electricity, but we had a battery powered TV. And you could not only hear it, you could see little tidbits what was happening. I think we're watching either NBC2 or ABC7. I don't know what. But Todd Chakowski was basically right on Charlotte Halter. And Todd was in a perfect area to describe what was happening. The Holiday Inn was actually used as like an evacuation shelter, even though that was a 2-story hotel right on the water. Ended up being the scene of a near tragedy. Fortunately, a lot of people evacuated the hotel because the Holiday Inn was gone. I mean, I remember Todd saying there was I saw 30-foot piece of the roof of the Holiday Inn go ripping off. And I knew that a hotel wasn't necessarily well built, but hearing a reporter say a 30-foot piece of the roof went off the hotel, told me the wind must have been crazy. See, thinking um that a wind thinking that a wind could be that nuts. And knowing what happened later, and knowing what happened in it, I wonder what percentage of Punta Gorda residents properly prepare. Because I guarantee you this, not many people prepare. Fortunately, Charley was, I guess you would say, the perfect category major hurricane hit because it was a small hurricane moving fast, not a big hurricane moving slow. Oh, but just as Andrew showed, wind can cause a lot of damage. Now there was surge on the coast. I think Fort Myers Beach saw surge 6 to 8 feet, but the surge was, I guess you would say, manageable. But because even though Charley was a stronger hurricane than other disasters on the Gulf Coast, particularly Katrina, Charley was a small hurricane moving 20 miles an hour, which meant the storm size wouldn't allow it to generate a big surge. So even though Charley was a Category 4 and certainly capable of producing 15 feet of surge, the strength, the lack of size, and the forward speed basically put limited surge. Unlike an Ian, where the size was greater and the storm was moving about 10 miles an hour, led to more surge on the Lee and Cayo County coastlines. We know what happened on Fort Myers Beach, but why do you think? Why do you think Charlotte County? Simple. My guess is Collier County, and not to mention, Captiva and Sanwell thought the storm's going to Tampa. Charlie's not coming here. We trust the media. But I think what happened, and maybe the Hurricane Center fooled everyone. I don't think the projected path was wrong because Southwest Florida was clearly in the cone, but most broadcasters, journalists, and meteorologists kept saying Tampa, 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 Tampa. And the biggest mistake in a hurricane is assume that the storm's going somewhere else. Because just when we think the storm's going one way, Mother Nature's saying, bleep this. I'm not going to Tampa. I'm gonna make a sharp right turn. Plus, nobody knows, even today, how the steering currents will change 6 hours from now, 12 hours from now, 3 hours from now. It's funny how Hurricane Charley went from 110 mile an hour Cat 2 hurricane to 150 mile an hour hurricane in about 4 hours, 5 hours. If anybody got on a 10 a.m. flight from New York to LA thinking, oh, Cat 2 hurricane? That's not a problem. They got off that flight at 3 o'clock thinking, what has happened? And unlike today, not every house, but many houses are not just built but have storm shutters, impact-resistant doors and windows. Not many houses, this is back in 2004, the building codes were not implemented like they are now. So developments like Bellatero, Wild Blue, these new condominiums are certainly capable of withstanding hurricanes. And we saw in Ian where the newer structures performed fairly well. But, it's crazy. And then Charley was not done after devastating Southwest Florida. Charley kept moving northeast, and about an hour and a half after leaving Charlotte County in waste, by the way, believe all three Charlotte County hospitals were wrecked. That's crazy to me. All three hospitals were wrecked. And by the way, I think in Lee County, I think the atrium actually broke at Health Park. I've been to Health Park many, many times, not recently, but the atrium collapsed. But Health Park itself was fairly well built and not going anywhere. But then in Arcadia, even though Charley had weakened a little, the circulation itself was fairly well contained and still brought quite a hammer. And I think Arcadia obviously saw sustained winds 115, 120. But what amazed me, the Turner Center, which was being used as an evacuation shelter, actually came apart. Part of the roof collapsed or came off the structure. And I thought, boy, that's odd. I don't think I've ever heard a shelter come apart. But looking back on it, I'm thinking the Turner Center was not really built to withstand hurricane force winds. The Turner Center maybe could hold 1,500 people, whatever, how many. But in this case, Arcadia's got a lot of manufactured homes, a lot of older homes. So I remember hearing stories about how families would send their children to the Turner Center thinking that building's stronger. Well, Turner Center's roof came off, so Plan B didn't work well. And many homes in Arcadia were heavily damaged. Some parts some parts even look worse than Charlotte County. And it's amazing that far inland, because I guarantee you this, very few, if any, people in Arcadia thought a Category 3 hurricane was going to hit there that afternoon, thinking the storm was going to hit Tampa and would be a rainy, windy day at best. Well, they got more rain and wind than they wanted, and even then, Hardy County saw winds at or above 100 miles an hour. Orlando and Daytona both saw hurricane force winds. And you know what area got off lightly? Tampa. I don't know why Tampa avoids hurricanes. They didn't avoid Helene and Milton 2 years ago. But for whatever reason, Tampa has largely avoided hurricanes. And, maybe it's luck, but, Jim Eds has said to me, if Tampa got hit by a major hurricane, bad things would happen, because Tampa's infrastructure hasn't been hit by a major hurricane in 100 years. And there's so much, and not just development, but all that water's got to go somewhere. And with the bay, a lot like what we saw in New Orleans, a lot like what happened in New York City during Sandy, that bay will funnel the water, and Tampa Bay could be gone in a day. But again, why did Charley go? Forecasts can change. One day the meteorologist says it's going to rain and then it'll be sunny and vice versa. And, Mother Nature can do crazy things. And what that means in Tampa and in Miami or wherever. Also, in 2004, there was no such thing as an iPhone phone. I mean, we were all using flip phones. And, thank goodness for Jim Farrell here, because both of those guys saw the storm wobbling to the right before anyone else. I mean, I saw videos of the Tampa meteorologist even saying that the storm's not wobbling, it's coming that way. But it's crazy how forecasts change. I remember NBC2, ABC7 having a neighborhood radar where they could look at individual neighborhoods and see, oh, you're in the eye. You're going to be in the eye in 3 minutes. You're getting pounded. Pound. Miss those days. Plain old weather. And also keeping calm but understanding, understanding the severity. Like what Brian Norcross did in Andrew. But 2004 was just a crazy year, and I think Charley showed what hurricanes can do. But yet Charley's one of the top 10, 12 hurricanes ever. But yet, in terms of death toll, Charley's not anywhere near the top. It's not, like Gene. It's not Mitch, the 1900 Galveston hurricane, King David. Not anywhere near those lists. And wind causes a great deal of damage. But as Andrew showed, as Charley showed, the storm surge not only causes damage, but kills the most people. Look how many people died in Ian. Look how many people died in Michael. Look how few people died in Andrew and Charley. If Southwest Florida gets hit by the 1926 hurricane, basically we did with Ian, the death toll is going to be higher than it was in Charley. And I promise you this. Hypothetically, what would have happened if Charley hits Tampa? But even with how small Charley was, the damage would have been anything beyond Tampa had seen. There would have been water everywhere. I mean, who knows? MacDill Air Force Base could have been flooded. Some of the hospitals could have been flooded. I think they all petroleum and oil tanks that could have been flooded. Maybe downtown Tampa gets inundated. Who knows? There certainly could be winds at or above 100 miles an hour, even in downtown Tampa. And Charley wasn't really a big hurricane. You imagine what Ian would have done, or the Great Miami Hurricane, or vice versa. But, maybe it's luck, maybe it's some higher power. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Why Tampa's a void. Because looking at Florida's history for storms, I don't know what it is. We stick out like a sore thumb. I mean, of course, Donna hit the Keys and Naples on just like Irma did. Of course, Andrew went basically here, here, here. Michael to the Panhandle. The Great Miami Hurricane came, of course, the 1928 hurricane, hitting Palm Beach and in a day in the dike. 1947 in Fort Lauderdale. I think that was Hurricane King, and then of course Dora hit in '64 near Jacksonville, and then of course Charley, Francis, Ivan, and Jean. Well, as you can see, Florida is a popular target for hurricanes, not just coming from the north and the south as Donna proved. The Michael going into the Gulf, Andrew going across the state, 1950, 26, 28. But, storms can even hit, in 2004, here we Francis and Jean basically hit this area of Florida. So the whole East Coast was basically raked twice in about a month. And then, of course, 2 years ago, Helene and Milton. So Florida is always and will probably be the number one target for hurricanes every single year. I think the anywhere from Brownsville, Texas to Wilmington, North Carolina can get hit by hurricanes. But Florida can get hit anywhere. Keys, Pensacola, Jacksonville, Miami. Now, some areas have largely avoided hurricanes. Miami's gone decades without a major disaster. Jacksonville hasn't really been hit since Hurricane Dora in 1964. Tampa's avoided trauma. But Mother Nature has got ways of sprinkling a little bit of pixie dust. Oh, it's been a while? I'll throw one in the Panhandle. I'll throw one in the Big Bend area. I'll throw some in Southwest Florida. And we've seen what the big hurricanes can do. Of course, already mentioned Charley, but the 1926 hurricane, inundating being the worst hurricane that ever hit Miami, the only category 4 that hit a major U.S. city. The 1928 Okeechobee hurricane's one of the deadliest storms in American history, with a couple thousand killed, and probably not accurate this number because a lot of those people killed were black migrant workers. 1935, the Labor Day hurricane, where hundreds died. Islamorada area, Key Largo, seeing winds that were beyond any hurricane that ever hit this country. Mom, are you trying to get in my hurricane video? Sorry. And of course, 1960, where Hurricane Donna not only hit the Keys, but then hit Southwest Florida, both as a major hurricane. So, and we of course remember what Irma did, when it hit the Keys in Southwest Florida on the 57th anniversary of Donna. 64, of course, Dora hit Jacksonville. 65 with Betsy hitting the Miami area. And then, you know, I mean, just crazy. I think there were other hurricanes. King in 1950. I think Fort Lauderdale had a hurricane in the 40s. Hurricanes, and of course, Andrew, Opal, the hurricanes 2004. And Charley was just the beginning. I mean, Frank and Gene, of course, in the East Coast, and Ivan had Gulf Shores and Pensacola, both as a major Cat 3 hurricane. And then '05 was crazy with Dennis hitting Pensacola eastward, sorry, Pensacola. Katrina, started its rampage, hitting the East Coast, which, even though only Category 1 winds, causing quite a bit of damage and deaths in southeast Florida. And of course, Wilma hitting just down the road in Cape Romano. Why Cape Romano, I don't know. Though for Wilma and Irma, in fact, be honest with you, if Irma didn't spend time over Cuba, I think we're looking at a far costlier and far deadlier hurricane here. And then of course Michael, and we know what's happened the last few years. But Charley to me is a storm that we're going to remember forever. Ever. I can remember most, if not everything that happened in Charley. And I think what Charley showed is that, the old saying is run from the water, hide from the wind. But even 20 years ago, 22 years ago, a Cat 4 hurricane hitting the U.S. was a very rare occurrence. Right. Seeing a storm of 150-mile-an-hour winds hit an area didn't happen. I mean, I think Hugo was about 135 when it hit McClellanville in 1989. But what Charley showed is that you put one hurricane in a populated area, with 140, 150 mile an hour winds, all heck's going to happen. And there were all ways to modernize homes, to strengthen them, retrofit. But in the end, doesn't matter how well built the house is. Mother Nature's going to cause carnage. I mean, there were houses that will destroy an Andrew, destroying Charlotte. And be honest with them, I'm surprised. They were cinder block homes, concrete homes. Sometimes at 140, 150 mile an hour winds, Mother Nature's going to do what she wants. And we can spend 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, looking at models, looking at the GFS Euro model, and wondering what the Google AI model. But in the end, the only way to guarantee safety in a hurricane zone is preparation, and then maybe evacuation. But prepare your home. Looking at where we are here in the still, we probably won't have to leave because we're 20 something feet above sea level, and a house that's built, with all the hurricane codes, storm shutters, maybe a roof, maybe we could use a new roof for that story for another day. Maybe we have storm shutters, and we're east of I-75. So this house is not going anywhere. What? Usually the evacuation zones for Southwest Florida are south and west of US 41 because those areas are more vulnerable to storm surge. generally evacuations are for storm surge, flooding, maybe in some cases manufactured house, but generally water, water. And when the Hurricane Center measure says, well, these areas are technically not an evacuation area, what do they mean? The Hurricane Center looks at if a house could sustain at least 3 feet of water above normally dry ground, meaning there could be storm surge at least 3 feet above normally dry ground, which would be life threatening. So a house that might get a foot of water, and then my friend Ted can attest, and Ian, he got a foot or so of water in his house now. I don't know if I would say he'd be in a life threatening. I mean, Ted could probably say was in a Cat 4 hurricane, but I'm not sure he would say the what the. I'm not sure, and so I'm not sure Ted's house was going to float away, unlike other houses. By the way, the by the maybe the most underrated video I can remember from Charley is when David Sutton and his crew showed water coming in the Times Square at the Gold Ring resort. So there was like 4, 5, 6 feet of water. And they were on the 5th floor and could see the water rise. And then I think there was a fire afterward. Talk about, I don't know what it is, but hurricanes, particularly after the storm, because hurricanes and tornadoes do strange things. It can, move gas lines, and in 100-mile-per-hour winds, all it takes is one match. Somebody a resident lights a cigarette, maybe gas leak, whatever. But a fire and 100-mile-an-hour winds. Yeah, that house made it through the hurricane. It's not going to make it through a fire. Yeah, your hurricane-proof house has collapsed in a fire. Bad day. But I think what can do, and just because a hurricane is finished doesn't mean the danger is over. Because especially if the electricity is gone, we've seen so many pictures of videos of generators and people starting generators and maybe getting carbon monoxide, getting hurt, maybe cutting fingers, cutting hands. And two of the dangers in a hurricane, one, cutting a hand or cutting a finger, because after a certain point, police, EMS won't come save emerges stranded victims. At a certain point, everyone is on their own. Police will not come and save you once the winds reach a certain threshold. And accidents can and will happen after hurricanes. Generators, chainsaws, somebody could die trying to evacuate. In fact, I think it was after Rita in 2005, where I think if I'm like 100 plus people died evacuating in the Houston Galveston area before Hurricane Rita hit. That's crazy. I think 100, maybe 105, 106, 107 evacuees died during the Rita evacuation. And this was before the hurricane hit. So the hurricane killed better part of 100 people before even hitting areas, before hitting Louisiana, before hitting Texas. But before I go, I want to discuss why Tampa and Miami are probably the two most vulnerable and maybe next cities potentially in line for a major hurricane. I don't wish it on anyone, but I've lived in Florida all my life. I've lived in Broward County for 3 years. I've lived on the West Coast all the other years. Tampa is vulnerable, and not just Tampa, but all the other islands. St. Pete, Clearwater, water. There's so many areas that are vulnerable to surge. Tampa, some of Tampa's buildings have seen winds at or around 100 miles an hour in Milton. Let's just say, Tropicana Field will never be used as a shelter again. At least you would hope not. But there are areas that haven't seen a major hurricane, and we don't know what a major hurricane would do there. And evacuating Tampa would be a very, very difficult job. We even saw in Ian where, for whatever reason, Lee County waited until the morning before the storm hit. 27, maybe 30 hours before the storm would hit, before issuing mandatory evacuation. By then, the evacuation should have been given a day earlier. I'd rather be safe than sorry. I mean, look what happened in New Orleans. Mayor Nagin and company gave an evacuation at 9 a.m., but Katrina was going to hit the next morning. So, yeah. And evacuating Tampa. If Southwest Florida needs 40 hours to evacuate, Tampa might need 80 hours. You look at Miami. There's so much wealth in the east coast of Florida. There's so many people from Buffalo who are from Venezuela or wherever, and they don't know what a hurricane is. And even the hurricane veterans think, I remember what Andrew did. I remember what Wilma did. I remember what Irma did. We're fine. This is going to be another storm. Let me tell you this. The city of Miami has not the Miami area. Yes, we know what happened doing Andrew and Homestead, Florida City. But Miami, downtown Miami, the airport, the core Gables business district, has largely escaped nature's fury the last several decades. What would happen if a Category 5, the Great Miami Hurricane, hit today? With all those areas vulnerable, with infrastructure that's not really seeing a major wind, that's not seeing a storm surge. What would happen if the causeways are flooded, the beaches are flooded, downtown Miami's flooded? My fear is that we could see a replay of New Orleans, or worse, because Miami's a bigger city than New Orleans. So, whether it's Charley hitting Punta Gorda, whether it's Andrew hitting South Miami, Florida's always going to be a target. And, we all love Florida. But living in Florida means being prepared and taking notice even before danger hits. Even if it means, if it means Vaco and we end up in Ocala, Gainesville for a day or two. You know what? I'd rather spend a day or two in Gainesville than lose my life or lose my house in a hurricane. I mean, yeah. Sometimes playing it safe. Sometimes better to be safe than sorry. So, wanted to go on now talking about Hurricane Charley, revisiting Hurricane Charley and Florida's history of hurricanes. Actually went pretty well. Hopefully I have more videos coming out, videos and streams talking about other storms. Hopefully I have one maybe a week or so for now, but still working on the dotting some I's, crossing T's, but knock on wood, I think we have another hurricane show coming out in the future. Well, this is a change. Not talking about sports for a whole hour. This is the Big D for Driving to Top Productions, Spunky Spectrum Sports. The Big D talking all things Charley and Florida's history with hurricanes, and be safe, and we'll get through it together.